see you, Val. Thank you very much for being here. How you doing, buddy?
Good.
You and I thought for a second there we were dressed alike, but I see now
it's possible.
we're not really dressed exactly alike. How you doing?
Good.
You want to talk about the movie first? You want to talk?
What if the love you saw on screen was all an act, and behind the scenes, the stars couldn't stand each other? In this video, we're counting down 16 on-screen couples who hated each other in real life. From classic Hollywood legends to modern-day icons, these co-stars made magic on camera, while barely speaking off it. The tension, the drama, the real-life feuds, they're all here. Some clashed quietly, others exploded behind the scenes. Stick around, because the true stories behind these fake romances are juicier than the scripts they performed. You'll never look at these famous pairings the same way again. Vivien Leigh and Marlon Brando, A Streetcar Named Desire. On screen, their chemistry crackled, raw, electric, unforgettable. Vivien Leigh played fragile Blanche Dubois. Marlon Brando was the explosive Stanley Kowalski. Together, they made A Streetcar Named Desire one of the most powerful dramas ever filmed. But behind the camera, it was a war of styles, egos, and emotional strain. Brando was all instinct and improv. He acted from the gut, unpredictable and animalistic. Leigh came from classical British theatre, disciplined, rehearsed, and exacting. She found his style messy. He found hers stiff. They admired each other's talent, sure, but that didn't stop the resentment. Things worsened as filming went on. Leigh was already struggling with bipolar disorder. The emotional toll of playing Blanche, a woman slipping into madness, blurred the line between performance and reality. Brando, meanwhile, couldn't stand what he called her acting with a capital A. He once said, "She was a great lady, but I was never comfortable around her." They pulled off legendary scenes, but the emotional damage stuck. Brando later admitted that working with Leigh was painful because it felt like watching someone break. And Leigh? She never forgot how isolated she felt on set. Their hate wasn't loud, it was quiet, cold, and permanently scarring. And if that was subtle tension, the next couple danced through pure frustration, literally. Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey, Dirty Dancing. They gave us one of the most iconic love stories of the 80s, Baby and Johnny, lost in the rhythm of a forbidden summer romance. But off-screen, Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey weren't swooning, they were seething. Swayze, trained and professional, found Grey's giggling and mood swings irritating. During rehearsals, she struggled to stay serious. He later wrote in his memoir, "She seemed particularly emotional, sometimes bursting into tears if someone criticized her." The constant retakes drove him crazy. Their working relationship was rocky from day one. Some scenes almost didn't happen because of the fighting. The famous lift in the lake? Tension was so high they nearly called it off. Still, when the cameras rolled, they delivered magic. But once the movie wrapped, they went their separate ways. No reunion, no sequel together, no cozy behind-the-scenes memories. They tolerated each other just enough to make Dirty Dancing a classic. And from a fictional summer camp to a Shakespearean tragedy, our next pair couldn't even fake teenage love. Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes, Romeo plus Juliet. They were the face of youthful passion in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet. But behind the pretty costumes and poetic dialogue, Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes were anything but star-crossed lovers. Claire, only 17 at the time, found Leo immature and irritating. He was always joking around on set, pulling pranks and making the crew laugh. Danes, more serious and focused, didn't find it funny. She later said in interviews that he acted like a goofball when she just wanted to work. Leo, in turn, thought she was uptight. He didn't enjoy her aloof attitude and complained that she took herself too seriously. Despite their tension, they didn't let it ruin the movie. Their chemistry worked, but only because of the fire beneath the surface. They never worked together again, and both have avoided mentioning each other publicly for years. Some love stories are short. Some just need to be left in Verona. And from young actors clashing to legends of sci-fi, the next feud took place on the final frontier. William Shatner and Nichols, Star Trek Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura, broke barriers on screen, but behind the scenes, things were far less harmonious. William Shatner's ego was legendary. He often took up more screen time than scripted and overshadowed his co-stars. Nichols, a groundbreaking actress in her own right, grew frustrated with his attitude. She once said, "There was no question he was the star, but he made sure we never forgot it." Nichols was so fed up that she considered quitting the show altogether. She stayed only after a conversation with Dr. Martin, Luther King Jr., who told her that her role was too important to give up. Over the years, the relationship between Shatner and Nichols remained distant. At conventions, they smiled. But there was always a tension, a buried resentment that never fully healed. Shatner later said he had no idea she felt that way. Maybe that's the problem. From space tension to romantic comedy disaster, the next pair couldn't even make it through filming without throwing shade. Julia Roberts and Nick Nolte, I Love Trouble. If the title wasn't enough of a warning, the set of I Love Trouble was exactly that. Trouble from start to finish. Julia Roberts and Nick Nolte played rival reporters with romantic tension, but in reality, they barely spoke unless cameras were rolling. Roberts called Nolte completely disgusting, complaining about his rude and aggressive behavior. Nolte snapped back, saying she was not a nice person. Their dislike was so strong that some scenes had to be shot with body doubles or filmed separately. Directors used editing tricks just to make it look like they were in the same room. Neither one hid their feelings. The press had a field day, and the movie tanked. They never worked together again, and have never said anything positive about the experience since. And with that, we move from newsroom feuds to erotic thrillers gone icy cold. Sharon Stone and Billy Baldwin, Sliver. On screen, Sliver was meant to ooze seduction and suspense. Sharon Stone had just come off Basic Instinct, and Billy Baldwin was poised for leading man status. The chemistry was supposed to be hot, electric, unmissable. But off-screen, it was ice cold. From the moment they met, Stone and Baldwin clashed. It wasn't screaming fights or tabloid-level blow-ups. It was something colder, disdain, passive aggression, silent hostility that crept into every scene. Baldwin reportedly complained that Stone was impossible to work with, calling her unpredictable and controlling. She, in turn, allegedly couldn't stand his energy and found him unprofessional. One incident, though, stands above the rest. During a particularly passionate kissing scene, Stone allegedly bit Baldwin's tongue. Hard. Not by accident. Not in character. On purpose. According to crew members, Baldwin stormed off set afterward, refusing to speak to her for the rest of the shoot unless absolutely necessary. The tension bled into the film's promotion. Stone flat-out refused to take part in the press tour, leaving Baldwin to do most interviews alone. He later said, "I don't need to talk about her. I survived the experience. That's enough." Despite the film's erotic theme, their connection felt forced, and audiences noticed. Critics panned the movie, calling it wooden and emotionally flat. The lack of spark between the leads wasn't just a directorial failure, it was real. And speaking of real-life clashes masked as passion, our next couple went from furious feuds to an actual relationship, proving that hate and love sometimes share the same stage. Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams, The Notebook. It's the love story that defined a generation. The Notebook gave us Noah and Allie, two soulmates fighting against the odds. Their chemistry was undeniable, burning, heartbreaking, unforgettable. But what most fans don't know is that behind those longing stares and teary reunions, the actors couldn't stand each other. Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams were constantly at odds on set. Gosling reportedly found McAdams too demanding, while she thought he was arrogant and aloof. At one point, Gosling even pulled the director aside and said, "Can you please bring in another actress to read off camera with me?" He didn't want to work with her. Director Nick Cassavetes later confirmed the feud. He even had to stage an intervention. He put the two actors in a room together. No crew, no cameras, just yelling it out. And that's exactly what they did. For an hour, they shouted, argued, vented everything they were holding in. When they came out, things had shifted, slightly. Not friendly, but manageable. Still, the tension added fuel to their performances. That screaming match in the rain? It wasn't acting. It was years of resentment, perfectly channeled into one iconic scene. And here's the twist. After filming wrapped, Gosling and McAdams started dating. Maybe all that heat had nowhere else to go. But even their real-life relationship didn't last, and both eventually walked away from each other and from The Notebook with bittersweet memories. From rain-soaked passion to Manhattan cool, the next feud lasted decades and never, ever thawed. Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Catrell, Sex and the City. On screen, they were the best of friends, talking love, life, and designer shoes over cosmopolitans, but the real story of sex and the city was far less glamorous. Behind the scenes, Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Catrell had a relationship defined by distance, resentment, and deep, lasting tension. From the beginning, there was an unspoken hierarchy on set. Parker, playing Carrie Bradshaw, was seen as the lead. She also became a producer, which gave her even more control. Catrell, who played the bold, unapologetic Samantha, quickly felt like an outsider. She resented Parker's higher salary, her influence, and what she saw as a clique mentality among the rest of the cast. The divide only grew worse during the filming of the two Sex and the City movies. Catrell refused to sign on to a third film. Publicly, she cited scheduling. Privately, insiders said she was done. Done with the favoritism. Done with the gossip. Done with being treated like the outcast. After the death of Catrell's brother in 2018, Parker posted condolences on social media. Instead of gratitude, she got fire. Catrell clapped back, "You are not my friend. Stop exploiting my tragedy for PR." It was brutal, raw, and final. Even in the HBO reboot, and just like that, Catrell was absent. Her character, Samantha, was written out with vague text messages from abroad. The message was clear. Some relationships can't be fixed. Not even with all the designer shoes in Manhattan. And while their feud simmered over the years, the next one exploded in front of the camera, because method acting went too far. Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep, Kramer vs. Kramer. Kramer vs. Kramer was the movie that launched Meryl Streep to greatness. It won her an Oscar. It also earned Dustin Hoffman his first Academy Award. But what most people don't know is that this powerful story about a couple's divorce was fueled by a real-life war behind the scenes. Streep was still grieving the loss of her boyfriend, John Cazale, when she signed on. She came into the role with heart and focus. Hoffman, ever the method actor, came in swinging. literally. In one early scene, Hoffman slapped her across the face without warning. She wasn't acting when she recoiled. She was stunned and furious. He later admitted that he pushed too far. He'd scream at her, provoke her, do anything to get a reaction. "I was acting out my own divorce," Hoffman said years later. "I took things out on her I shouldn't have." Streep didn't appreciate the tactics. She once said, "There's a fine line between dedication and abuse." He crossed it. Despite the tension, or maybe because of it, the film soared. The performances were raw and real because the pain behind them was genuine. They've never worked together again, from dramatic custody battles to intergalactic grudges. The next feud went on for decades, between two beloved robots. Anthony Daniels and Kenny Baker, Star Wars. You'd think that playing C-3PO and R2-D2 would make you friends. After all, the two droids were inseparable on screen, bumbling, bickering, but loyal to the end. Off-screen, their real-life relationship was cold, awkward, and downright nasty. Anthony Daniels, C-3PO, was classically trained, precise, and proud of his work. Kenny Baker, R2-D2, a little person inside a rolling metal shell, often felt overlooked. He claimed Daniels treated him like he didn't exist. "He looked down on me," Baker once said. "He was rude and dismissive. No time for me at all." Daniels, for his part, never seemed to deny it. He simply avoided talking about Baker, focusing more on the technical demands of his own role. Their interactions on set were minimal, and when they did happen, they were icy at best. They appeared at some Star Wars conventions together over the years, but never shared a stage, never posed together, never joked like old friends. Even decades later, long after Return of the Jedi and into the sequel era, the frost never thawed. The galaxy may have been far, far away, but the tension between these two was uncomfortably close. Teri Hatcher and Marsha Cross, desperate housewives behind the picture-perfect lawns of Wisteria Lane. Something darker was brewing. Teri Hatcher and Marsha Cross, who played Susan and Bree, two suburban powerhouses, weren't just feuding characters on screen. Off-camera, the tension was just as real, and far less scripted. From the show's early days, there was a quiet power struggle among the cast. Hatcher was positioned as the face of the series, often front and center in marketing and media interviews. This reportedly rubbed Cross, and some of the other cast members, the wrong way, especially when it came to billing, publicity photos, and press events. Cross, known for her composed and sharp demeanor, didn't appreciate Hatcher's Sunshine Act. Behind closed doors, it was whispered that Cross found Hatcher difficult and isolating, while Hatcher felt excluded. From the clique forming around co-stars Eva Longoria and Felicity Huffman. "I just want to do my job and go home," Hatcher once said, subtly throwing shade at the drama she was clearly caught in. The tension became so well known that it spilled into the tabloids. During the final season photo shoot, it was reported that the other women insisted Hatcher not be placed in the center of the cast photo, a symbolic pushback against what they saw as her diva behavior. By the series' final episodes, scenes between Hatcher and Cross were kept to a minimum. Professional smiles, scripted lines, but zero warmth. Even after the show wrapped in 2012, none of the cast spoke of a full reconciliation. Whatever happened behind those wrought iron fences stayed locked away. And while this feud simmered in silence, the next pairing was fire and ice from the start, and had no problem taking it public. Richard Gere and Deborah Winger, an officer and a gentleman. They gave us one of the most iconic romantic finales in movie history. Zach Mayo in dress whites, sweeping Paula into his arms. An Officer and a Gentleman became a classic. But what you didn't see was the boiling hatred between Richard Gere and Deborah Winger that nearly blew the whole thing apart. Winger, a fiercely passionate actress, didn't mince words. She openly disliked Gere, calling him a brick wall, and complained that acting opposite him felt like talking to a piece of furniture. She thought he was emotionally flat, too concerned with looking good to deliver anything real. Gere, in return, found Winger volatile and unpredictable. Her outbursts, sarcasm, and refusal to play Hollywood politics made her difficult to work with. The two fought constantly during production. Not screaming matches, just steady, cold hostility that made every scene a battle of wills. Director Taylor Hackford later admitted the tension between them was very real. And strangely, that friction gave the movie its spark. Their resentment turned into raw chemistry on camera. It worked. Just not for them. Winger didn't attend the Oscars that year, even though she was nominated. When asked about her time on the film, she simply said, "It was not a lot of fun." Gere has rarely mentioned her since. From naval bases to beachfront comedies, the next screen romance was hiding pure disgust. Just ask Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe, Some Like It Hot. In Some Like It Hot, Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe created movie magic. The film is still hailed as one of the greatest comedies ever made. But behind Monroe's soft voice and Curtis's dashing charm was one of Hollywood's pettiest, most bitter co-star clashes. Curtis was vocal from the start. He did not enjoy working with Monroe. When asked what kissing her was like, he infamously quipped, "It's like kissing Hitler." The comment was so outrageous, it stuck to him for life. He later claimed he was joking. But most of the crew, and Monroe herself, weren't laughing. Monroe's chronic lateness, forgetfulness, and need for dozens of takes wore everyone thin. Curtis, known for his professionalism, was furious. The two had a brief fling years before filming, but by 1959, any fondness had turned to frustration. Curtis couldn't understand how someone so chaotic was still the star of the show. Monroe, for her part, found Curtis stiff and judgmental. She felt unsupported, often paranoid on set, and isolated even when surrounded by people. It's no surprise that their scenes required multiple retakes, not because of acting, but because of tension boiling under every smile. Still, the result was flawless. The movie was a hit, and the performances legendary. But Monroe and Curtis never worked together again. The magic stayed on film. The animosity never faded. And while theirs was a classic tale of frustration masked as flirtation, the next feud was far more surprising, especially when it involved America's favorite grandmas. Betty White and Bea Arthur, the Golden Girls on screen, they were everyone's favorite TV grandmas, sharing late-night cheesecake, swapping biting one-liners, and redefining what it meant to age with sass. The Golden Girls became a beloved classic. But while Rose Nylund and Dorothy Zbornak made the perfect odd couple on camera, the real-life relationship between Betty White and Bea Arthur was far from golden. The chemistry was undeniable. Betty White's sweet, naive Rose perfectly played off Bea Arthur's dry, sarcastic Dorothy. That contrast made for some of the show's best moments. But it also mirrored their actual personalities, and that's where the trouble started. Arthur, a theater-trained actress with a sharp wit and no time for frills, reportedly found White's upbeat, bubbly demeanor hard to tolerate. She considered it too cheerful, too polished. "She was a nice person," Arthur once admitted, "but not someone I need in my life." The words weren't explosive, but they were cold, controlled, final. Betty White, always the professional, never fired back. She rarely said a bad word about anyone, and she didn't start with B. But over time, she opened up about the distance between them. B was not fond of me, she once said in an interview. She thought I was a pain in the neck. That simple line said it all. There weren't shouting matches or dramatic walk-offs. This wasn't tabloid-level feuding. Instead, it was a slow, quiet freeze. Two women with wildly different energies, coexisting for the sake of something bigger than themselves. And it worked. For 7 seasons, they delivered magic, never letting their differences affect their work. Still, it hurt. Arthur, according to those close to her, felt frustrated by White's tendency to play to the audience and her always upbeat persona. White, meanwhile, felt the chill and kept her distance. Co-star Rue McClanahan once described the cast dynamic as 4 separate individuals who happened to be great together, but didn't necessarily hang out after the cameras stopped. After the Golden Girls ended, the separation became even clearer. Arthur famously skipped reunion specials and cast events. When the cast received joint honors or accolades, she often declined to participate. White, ever gracious, continued to praise Arthur's comedic brilliance, calling her a wonderful actress and a very strong woman. But there was never a reconciliation, never a public moment of healing. Even at Arthur's passing in 2009, Betty's tribute was simple and respectful. "She was a brilliant actress, and I will miss her," White said. No stories, no warmth, just the kind of quiet grace she was known for. It's easy to assume that actors who share the screen for years must grow close. But in this case, professional respect didn't translate to personal connection. Their differences were just too deep, and neither one was willing to fake a friendship off-set. And maybe that's what made their on-screen dynamic so compelling. Dorothy's eye rolls, Rose's clueless optimism. It felt real because, in many ways, it was. What mattered most was that they didn't let the distance interfere with the show's legacy. The Golden Girls remains one of television's most enduring sitcoms, thanks in no small part to their brilliance. But behind the scenes, it was never quite as warm and cozy as it looked. And as we leave the palm trees of Miami behind, we head straight into a world of international espionage, where James Bond and his lover barely made it through filming without going nuclear. Pierce Brosnan and Teri Hatcher. Tomorrow Never Dies. James Bond and a Bond girl. What could go wrong? In Tomorrow Never Dies, Pierce Brosnan's 007 and Teri Hatcher's Paris Carver heat up the screen. But the chemistry was short-lived. Behind the scenes, Brosnan and Hatcher barely spoke, and when they did, it wasn't pretty. Brosnan, stepping into his second Bond film, was focused, serious, and punctual. Hatcher? Not so much. She frequently arrived late to set, sometimes hours behind schedule. Brosnan grew impatient. He once snapped, "What is she doing? Making another baby?" What he didn't know was she actually was. Hatcher was newly pregnant, something she hadn't publicly shared. When he found out, Brosnan felt guilty. He later said, "I was a little too harsh. I didn't know what she was going through." Still, the damage was done. Their scenes together were strained. Hatcher finished her role quickly and distanced herself from the franchise entirely. She never returned to the Bond universe, and Brosnan never mentioned her again with much warmth. And finally, for our last entry in this segment, we turn to teenage angst turned ice-cold chemistry. Claire Danes and Jared Leto. My so-called life. In My So-Called Life, Angela Chase was hopelessly in love with Jordan Catalano. For millions of viewers, the pair defined 90s teen romance. But Claire Danes and Jared Leto? They didn't feel the love. Danes, just 15 when the show began, took the work seriously. Leto, already in his 20s and still new to acting, seemed distant. Danes later said, "He was so beautiful, but so aloof. I was intimidated." She also said he barely spoke to her unless they were filming. Leto didn't deny it. He kept to himself, didn't socialize with the cast, and treated the show like a job, not a passion project. Their dynamic made scenes feel real, but the connection stopped as soon as the cameras cut. They've never reunited since, and their romance became another case of on-screen fire and off-screen frost. And there you have it. 16 on-screen couples who hated each other in real life. They made us believe in love, passion, and perfect chemistry, even when they were barely holding it together off camera. Just goes to show, acting really is a powerful thing. If you enjoyed the drama behind the drama, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and drop a comment letting us know which feud surprised you most. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the best acting happens when the cameras stop rolling. See you in the next one.